My name is Gunter Sharp, and this is the presentation for Group 5 on why we think that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is a bad idea. We've seen in the news recently, especially as a new presidential race kicks off, of all these politicians and people claiming that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, or as they say, a living wage, is a good idea. It will help bring people out of poverty, it'll grow the economy, and provide all sorts of benefits for employers and employees alike. We don't think this is quite the case. In fact, we think it's the opposite. Based on data we've collected, we find that it does not lead to economic growth. We question whether or not it's even constitutional, and that it might actually lead to more automation as employers are unable to afford keeping these employees, and its overall impact on unskilled workers. Overall, we think it has negative effects, and we're going to dive into each of those topics and discuss how it affects you in a way that you may not even have thought about.
Hi, I'd like to talk to you about taxes. We've been talking about having a minimum wage of $15 an hour, and that sounds great. Let's just talk about where that money's going to go. Let's say you are married and your spouse, both of you make $15 an hour. If you're both making $15 an hour and you're working 52 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, you should approximately make $62,400. That sounds like a great amount of money, $62,000. But now let's talk about where your money actually goes. So if you made $62,000 and you're married, according to the 2018 tax brackets, you have to pay 12% into federal income tax. That is approximately $7,500 of that $62,400. That leaves you with approximately $55,000 left over. Then most states have a state income tax. Oklahoma's is 5%, California's 13%. Some states don't have them, but over 30 states have a state income tax. So we're going to use a 6% state income tax on that same $62,000 because you pay it on the total amount you made, which leaves you with paying the state $3,700. When you take that out of your total income, you're left with $51,000. Now, most states, not even most states, all states, you're going to pay property taxes. So property taxes is where you live. Now, if you're going to rent or buy, either way, you're paying the property tax. So let's just round that number to even $2,000, which is kind of conservative, but you're going to take $2,000 off of the money you made. So $2,000 from the $51,000 you made approximately leaves you with $49,300. Now, at this point, you haven't bought a single thing you wanted to, you just paid in taxes. But let's talk about what the government has made it mandatory for you to buy. The Affordable Health Care Act. You have to buy insurance. Since you have to buy insurance, let's do a deductible of $200 per pay period, which is a pretty reasonable insurance for a family. $200 times 26 leaves you with $4,800 having to pay for your health insurance. $4,800 from your $4,900 that you had leaves you with $44,500 approximately. Now, it is no secret that there is a 27% corporate income tax. So anytime you're going to go buy something, guess what? As a consumer, you're going to pay that tax, because anybody who knows anything about economics knows that taxes gets passed on to the consumer. So as you're spending your money on whatever you want to spend it on, you're going to pay a 27% corporate income tax on that, which is approximately $12,000 on top of the $44,500 you were left over with. That knocks you all the way down to $32,500. Now, most states have a sales tax. Some states are 9 cents, some states are not 7 cents. I just rounded it to a 7% sales tax. So when you go spend that money, they're going to get some more money off of you. So from that $32,500, we take another 7%, which is approximately $2,000, and you are left over with $30,500. Now keep in mind, you started with $62,400, and now you are left with $30,500, and you paid that in taxes or something that the government's made it mandatory for you. And I never mentioned VAT taxes or your registration for your cars or any other types of money that you end up donating to the government. The point of this argument is though we are debating for a living wage, I believe we are debating the wrong issue. I don't care what you set the minimum wage at. as long as the government keeps taking 50% of your money. I think we can all agree that if you're making $15 an hour, you're not exactly rich. $62,000 a year sounds like a great income, but you're not exactly way up there on the social income ladder. But based off a $15 minimum wage job, I just proved to you the fact of the matter is that half of your money is going to be going to the government regardless. You hear about stories back in the 80s when people were making $7 an hour and they were living high on a hog. They were able to have a single income family. The point of the argument is that we're trying to change the minimum wage to justify a living wage. But to me, it is the wrong argument. The politicians are pushing for a minimum wage when they need to be pushing for less government. It is not the minimum wage that is going to make people get out of poverty. It is not taking the money from the people and allowing them to be able to spend it where they would like. Thank you.
And continuing with the conversation, I'd like for us to now compare and analyze where the government and the Constitution fit into all of this. What are some cases or examples that we haven't looked at? Have states tried it before? Has the Supreme Court looked at it? Why is this such an important thing for us? And what I would like to explain to you now is why lawmakers have in the past tried to implement these and the effects that they have caused, and also look at some recent cases where governments have proposed an increase to $15 and the effects that it has had on the community and the state itself. In order to further this discussion, we will now talk about a situation that occurred in Connecticut where one of the first proposals was actually made by Governor Lamont, who called for a raise in minimum wage to $15 per hour when the current minimum wage was about $10.10. The governor's proposal would put about $4.90 more towards hourly wages and about $10,192 per year for full-time employees. So a lot of people would argue that, this is really good for people because obviously like retail chains and restaurants would be able to absorb this because what they would just do is they would reduce the profitability publicly through traded companies, but it would increase stocks for them. But with that said, it would affect small businesses, which is the lifeblood of the state. And with the secondary effects of the economy, it would pose a huge problem for Connecticut's middle class who are living on a budget and seniors who are on fixed incomes. With that said, it would also increase taxes so much that the governor's proposal would have to have increases in tolls, possibly like higher taxes for groceries. They were looking at so many things to get this to happen. Obviously, with that said, we've already discussed heavily that automation would be a thing that Connecticut did consider, and that the inflation would be really hard and drive wage increases for non-hourly workers, provided that it was in an equitable manner. In conclusion, this proposal that Governor Lamont has proposed for his people actually will hurt them because the middle class will take a huge chunk, and even the seniors will hurt from this just to increase the minimum wage by $4.90. For Americans who are on fixed incomes like this, at what point can you argue that their freedoms are hurt and that their freedoms have been violated? Because if you're able to open up a free business and you're able to open up an LLC and you put the time and effort into it and you have a right to pay your employees as much as you like, and if they want to work for you, they can take the job, at what point does a governor have a right to come in and push a $15 wage gap when your business doesn't output that much money, but it's enough to survive for you and your family, it's enough to survive for your employees, your customers, etc.? What will happen to those kind of small businesses? Well, what will happen that we've discussed is inflation. They'll have to drive up the prices. What we'll now look at is a Supreme Court case in Florida where the $15 wage was proposed, and there were organizers that submitted more than 10% of valid signatures required to get the Supreme Court of Florida to review it. To be exact, they submitted 8,528 signatures to the Florida Division of Elections office in February of 2019. And what they're doing is they're proposing this on the next ballot, which is in 2020, which is a general election. The proposal is being pushed by Orlando attorney John Morgan, who also led an effort to get medical marijuana on the constitutional ballot in 2014 and 16, which ultimately passed. With that said, that means that this might be the first case of Florida as a state being able to push a $15 wage gap into its state, and we can actually look at the effects that it has on the state instead of just theorizing about it. The language proposed in the constitutional amendment calls for a minimum wage of $10 an hour, just starting in 2021. And each year it would go up by $1, and it would reach the $15 per hour in 2026. With that said, the Supreme Court is being asked to determine whether the proposed language complies with the single subject requirement of the Florida's Constitution, and whether the ballot title and summary complies with Florida law. When we look at this plan in Florida, it is unique and different from what we have argued in the past. It shows us that if we only increased it by $1 a year, inflation wouldn't probably spike as much. Minimum wage would go up slowly. The middle class and seniors wouldn't be affected as much. Over time, they would be able to balance their budgets. They'd be able to adapt with the change. Businesses would be able to adapt with the change. It's unique to look at something like this because we are taking a firm stance against the $15 minimum wage, but what if it's implemented in a way that it doesn't affect small businesses like we have talked in the past? This could also be good for big corporations, as they could slowly follow the linear increase by not laying off people, but slowly inflating their prices to keep the people that are working there, but also to help them have better lives. In conclusion, we looked at two different cases. We have Connecticut, where the proposal most likely won't work. It's going to hurt its citizens. It's going to create a situation where taxes are high. Small businesses might not be able to afford many workers, or they're going to have to inflate their prices, which will drive away their business and could eventually put them out of business. If we look at Florida, the proposal could actually work. If you only increase it by $1 every year, small businesses will be able to adjust. Big corporations might actually be able to keep their workers, and it would be a good thing for the state. But we don't know yet. We have to wait and see. And with that said, as Americans, we need to ask ourselves, where would this fit in with me? Does this violate my freedoms? Does this help my freedoms? Does this give me a better opportunity in this country? How would it help you? How would it help an average American every day? And those are the things that we have discussed in this, and we're going to continue discussing.
Minimum wage positions are entry-level positions that usually do not require special skills or training. Such positions are usually held by students and are used to gain experience or as a stepping stone to a better position. As minimum wage is raised, businesses must find a way to sustain profits. This can result in automating, reducing the workforce, and possibly increasing the workload on employees that are retained. Some employers may feel the need to increase all workers' pay in order to keep higher paid positions ahead of the minimum. This can become a huge burden on businesses, especially a small business. Increasing minimum wage will have many effects on the economy. One of these effects is a rise in inflation. One reason raising the minimum wage causes inflation to occur is as wages are raised, prices are increased to cover the cost of production. Higher costs for companies leads to wage push inflation, while higher spending by workers leads to demand pull inflation. in Effects of Minimum Wage on Economic Growth, Inflation, and Aggregate Demand over Aggregate Supply, states that a 10% rise in the minimum wage leads to about a 0.3 percentage point rise in prices on food away from home for the first year after the wage increase, and an additional 0.1 percentage point the second year after the increase. Industries with a lot of low-wage employees may have to raise prices in order to offset the wage increase, passing the cost on to the consumers. According to research from the Economic Policy Institute, for a 10% raise in minimum wage, the inflation rate increases 8 basis points higher than the year before. A basis point is a unit of measure that describes the percentage of change. 1 basis point is equal to 1/100th of a percent, as defined by Investopedia.com. An increase in wages leads to higher labor costs, creating the need for businesses to raise prices to offset those costs. Another implication of raising the minimum wage is the loss of low-wage jobs. Some companies may choose to outsource the work. Outsourcing can relieve the pressure of paying higher wages because the work can be completed by low-wage laborers in other countries. Companies involved in international markets are the most likely to move their production to countries with low labor costs. An article by Madison Elder states that in 2014, a study conducted of over 400 chief financial officers by Duke University concluded that over 70% of firms would increase contracting, outsourcing, or the move of production out of the United States in the event that the wage is raised. Undoubtedly, America's global trade position would be compromised altogether if the federal minimum wage was increased. Raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour would have long-lasting negative effects on the U.S. economy. Inflation and outsourcing are just two of these possible effects.
There are several effects that can occur if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Raising the minimum wage to $15 per hour would have a detrimental impact on both business owners and hourly workers over longer periods, according to Forbes. Recent studies on the West Coast, where this initiative originated, have shown that for every 1% increase in wages, there will be a 0.3 to 2% increase in the unemployment rate. Over 73% of American Economic Association labor economists believe that a significant increase in minimum wages will lead to employment losses. 68% of these employment losses will fall disproportionately on those who are the least skilled workers in the workplace, according to FBOnline.org. Small businesses that employ just a few workers are the backbone of the U.S. economy, but would suffer from significant reductions in their profit margins and cash flow due to the burden imposed by higher minimum wages. According to the Small Business Administration, small businesses have provided 55% of all jobs and 66% of all new jobs in the United States since the 1970s, according to Forbes. Small business owners have few prospects to offset these increased overhead costs, given the competitive pressures from their respective industries. These competitive pressures prohibit small businesses from passing on these additional costs to their customers. As a result, small business owners must resort to part-time employees to survive, yet still meet the operational demands of the company. Eventually, a small business will have to compromise its delivery of product or services, which makes it less competitive in the marketplace. Smaller businesses, such as restaurants, who employ only a few workers, will ultimately be forced out of business. Workers will experience either a reduction in hours, that is, being designated a part-time employee instead of a full-time employee, which costs them many of their benefits, lose their jobs, or both over the course of time. Employees would be designated as part-time employee instead of full-time employee. As a part-time employee, they would lose the benefit package that may be available to full-time employees, which costs employee but helps offset the business owner's labor costs. A $15 minimum wage essentially dries out all jobs that do not produce over $35,000 a year, which is annual cost of a minimum wage worker, including wages and federal taxes, according to heritage.org. The end simply does not justify the means. Workers will pay the price for higher minimum wage legislation instead of the poor, who experience no direct benefit from higher hourly wages. Most low-income citizens are unemployed and/or drawing government benefits or not actively seeking employment. Therefore, this legislation is a highly ineffective tool at fighting the genuine underlying causes of poverty in America. Only 6% of AEA economists believe that minimum wage hikes are an efficient way to alleviate poverty, according to FEOnline.org. 70% of the AEA economists believe that an expanded earned income tax credit would best assist those in poverty. Raising the minimum wage to $15 per hour will cause many business owners to seek more automation of their operations. New evidence shows that business owners are replacing low-skilled workers with automation, according to the CNBC. Based on data from 1980 to 2015, increasing the minimum wage significantly decreases the number of automatable jobs held by low-wage employees. These effects are among the largest for individuals employed in the manufacturing industry and are larger for the oldest and younger workers, for females and for blacks. The fast food industry, as well as giant retailers such as Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, are replacing cashiers with self-service kiosks and other robots, according to Forbes. Those industries are the exact industries targeted most frequently by minimum wage activists, yet they do the most damage to its workers. Other commercial entities, such as banks and other financial companies, are now exploring new automation in the form of smart ATMs and kiosks to serve its customers at a fraction of the cost of hiring staff and paying a benefit package. Previously, automation was not a real threat to employment of the nation's workforce. Today, major advances in artificial intelligence creates a formidable competitor to human labor in the workplace. Automated machines controlled by computers do not simply replace human labor, they replace and outperform human intelligence.
To wrap things up, we think it's pretty clear that raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is a bad idea just because of the negative effects on employers, employees, and the economy as a whole, and everyone throughout this country. But that doesn't mean it's a discussion that shouldn't be had. It is an important topic, and it would be great for hardworking people in our society to be able to earn what they're worth. But we just don't think that the federal government mandating that employers pay their employees a certain amount is the best way to do it. This could be accomplished through cutting business taxes to allow small businesses to raise employee wages, and just overall increasing competition so that employees have to pay their employees well in order to keep them. Thank you for watching.
Now that you've watched our video, we have a few questions for you. Did you learn anything from this? Did you feel like you had a new understanding of minimum wage? I think I did. For me, I don't get paid $15 an hour, and I feel like I would love $15 an hour, but after what I've learned about it, I'm kind of content with where I am. But how do you feel about it? And if you feel really passionate about getting a $15 minimum wage increase in Oklahoma, what would you do? Do you think that we should go to our local government and talk to our senators? Do you think that we should have a census? Or do you think that we should just, talk it up among ourselves? These kind of questions, I'm just curious to see how you feel about it. And with that said, we're very interested in what you thought about this presentation. If you want to talk about this further and discuss it, you're more than welcome to start a discussion in our discussion group, and we'll respond back to you. We're excited about this, and we really learned a lot. So besides that, have a great day. Congratulations if you're a senior, and have a great summer.